Good afternoon, church. It is time for your midweek check-in and challenge. And I want to start off by saying, one of the things that I have thought is really neat is when you get on social media, just the amount of encouragement that you see people giving one another. They're just so nice to each other. When you flip on the news, just the amount of encouraging words that you hear. It's just so nice to live in a world where it's just this constant barrage of encouragement from people around you. Now, maybe you're thinking, what are you talking about? You mean to tell me that hasn't been your experience when you get on social media? It's not people encouraging one another and being nice. The news doesn't just have positive things to say. You're right. In fact, it's just the opposite of that. It seems like we live in a world that thrives on negativity and problems and difficulty. And so just for a few minutes, your midweek check-in and challenge, I want to encourage you to encourage others. That's your challenge for this week, is to be an encourager. And so I want you to ask this question: do we have the tendency to build people up or to lift their spirits, or does it come more naturally for us to want to tear people down and to, be critical of other people? And I certainly believe that in today's times, encouragement is very, very much needed, but it's often a rare thing. And it especially needs to come from us as Christians. And in fact, more often than not, people have the tendency to discourage one another, to pull people down, to criticize, and to gossip, talk bad about others. But I think there's a precedent in the Bible for us as Christians to be encouragers, to be positive people. Now, not to be pie in the sky, Pollyanna thinking everything is going to be rosy. We have to be honest and understand that there's problems in the world and problems in our lives. But as Christians, when it comes to with other people, why not lift them up when you can lift them up? And this is a challenge, especially in families. It's a challenge often for me as well. I've come across some research from the John Gottman Institute. If you're familiar with John Gottman, he does tremendous research on relationships, husbands and wives, marriage relationships. And he says this. He says, when it comes to our conversations, when it comes to our interactions, we receive 6 negative messages for every 1 positive message. So think about that. For every positive message you get from somebody, there's probably 6 negative messages that you've also received that day. So when someone says, "Oh, you look nice today," throughout the course of the day, you also got messages like, "Hey, you look tired. Have you put on weight? Your breath stinks. Did you look in the mirror this morning? Where did you get that shirt? The circus?" So this is just how it goes. For every 1 positive message, there are 6 negative messages in your life that you hear. For every time someone says, "Hey, you did a really good job on that," there are 6 other comments along the lines of, "Hey, you could have done better." Or, "What's the big deal? So you did something great. You could have done more. What took you so long? I've seen it done better. Anybody could have done that." Because this is a big deal. For every 6 critical messages, there's only 1 positive message. And I think sometimes we wonder why people are so grouchy and anxious and, just tense all the time. I think a lot of people are just discouraged, especially with everything that's going on in our world right now and the times that we live in. So I think this explains a lot. It explains a lot of there's tensions in marriages. It explains probably why a lot of kids seek attention and approval. They're looking for support and encouragement. And so just for a few minutes, I just want to remind you of the need to be encouragers. And your challenge for today is to find 1 person. It could be a friend, could be a family member, could be a coworker, anybody, and speak some encouragement into their life today. Speak some good things. Chuck Swindoll, great preacher, man of God, he says this. He says, "The lack of encouragement is almost epidemic." And he says, to illustrate this point, when did you last encourage someone else? And I would ask you that. When did you last encourage someone else? He says, "I firmly believe that an individual is never more Christ-like than when we are full of compassion for those who are down, needy, discouraged, or forgotten. How terribly essential is our commitment to encouragement." Encouragement is a needed thing, and it seems like a small thing, but honestly, it is a great thing. If you spent your life as a full-time encourager, it would not be time wasted. And so really we have the option of being a Debbie Downer and speaking criticism into people's life. But at the same time, we also have the opportunity to be somebody that just spreads joy and happiness and encouragement in people's lives. But for some reason, the need to encourage others often just flies right under the radar. So often we just don't see the importance of it. We don't see it as a critical practice, and so we don't apply it. But as Christians, this has to change. The Bible says we are to be salt and light. And certainly that's pointing people toward Christ. But the book of Romans says this, that the kindness of God leads people toward repentance. And so I think as Christians, showing encouragement and kindness would go a long way in our evangelism as well. But let's be honest. What comes naturally to us? And the natural man is bent toward negativity, toward destruction, towards critical, being critical of other people, to push people down so we can, boost ourselves up. So being an encourager means you have to swim upstream. It's going against the current of this world to encourage people. Now think about all the conversations that you have throughout the day. We are talkers. We talk to people every day. Our kids, our spouse, our coworkers, people at churches, bosses, babysitters, the lady at the checkout counter, the guy at the gas station. Your day is full of conversations. It's what you do. You talk. Even if you're a person of few words, you still have to have multiple conversation throughout the day. Now, think about all of those as opportunities to encourage. You never know what somebody's going through. You never know when they may need an encouraging word. So why not give them one? When it comes to our homes, the conversations we have there, we often take for granted. And unfortunately, even those are easy to drift towards in a negative place. Instead of encouraging our kids, it's easy to be critical of our kids. Wives, instead of encouraging our husbands, it's easy to be critical. Husbands, instead of lifting up our wives, it's easy to pick out the things that you don't like or the things that you find annoying. So we need to use our mouths to encourage, to elevate, to lift one another up. And so really what I want to do is just look at one really simple passage, just one verse on this midweek check-in and challenge. And it's a proverb. This is Proverbs 11:25, and this is what it says. A generous person will prosper, and whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. A generous person will prosper, and whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. When we refresh those around us, we will be refreshed. Now, how cool is that? If you could use some refreshment, and I know you could, well, try refreshing other people. If you want to be encouraged, try encouraging the people around you. Now, I think this principle works in two ways. Let me read the verse again. Proverbs 11:25. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. First of all, this is the act of speaking words of life. The act of encouraging just produces joy in our lives because you feel good when you encourage others. There's something about seeing somebody else's spirits lift that just makes you feel good. Now, I want to tell you about a wonderful woman in our church that I have always admired and always appreciated. Her name is Miss Jean Jones. And I can't tell you, in ministry, as a young man growing into an older man, I can't tell you how many times Miss Jean sent me a card, pulled me aside, did something special for me just to encourage me. Sometimes it was an email that said, I'm proud of you, you're doing a wonderful job. Sometimes it was a hug at church. Sometimes it was a card in the mail that just says, we're so thankful for you and Devin. And there have been so many times that Miss Jean Jones just brightened my week. And as a result, I've never seen her. I mean, I'm sure she has been, but I see her most often than not with a smile on her face. Whoever refreshes other people will be refreshed. Another guy that I know is a guy by the name of Eric Moore, does the same thing. He, whenever he calls, he's always going to say something positive and good. He's always going to tell me that I'm the man and why I'm the man. And this is just how he is. My dad has the tendency to be this way, to be an encourager. He sees that you can look at life, glass half empty or glass half full. And he would rather see life as, the glass half full. And so whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. If you want to be refreshed, refresh others. The second way I think this principle works is when we encourage others, we're more likely to be encouraged in return. Some people feel lonely. Did you know loneliness is a major problem in our world right now? It is, again, epidemic proportions, people that feel loneliness. And so when we feel lonely, one thing I want to remind us of is you have to, be a friend to have a friend. So you have to be intentional about it. It takes work to reach out to other people, but honestly, it's not hard. You pick up a phone, you make a couple of phone calls, and you just check in with people, and eventually what you notice is they start to do the same thing with you. They start to, touch base with you and check in with you and see how you're doing. And so if you want to have friends, you have to be a friend. And so it says, whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. And the second way I think this principle works is like this. When we encourage others, we're more likely to have encouragement in return. So if we aren't careful, we will drift toward criticism. This is where we naturally go. 6-to-1 ratio points that out. But everyone needs encouragement. And when we give that encouragement, you're also more likely to receive encouragement. So we feel refreshed just seeing the smile on somebody's face. And also we're likely to be refreshed by the fact that we refresh others. And so it's like a weird compound math here. The more refreshment you bring into the lives of others, the more refreshment you receive in your own life. But it's so hard to remember this sometimes. But everyone does need encouragement. Founder of Chick-fil-A, Truett Cathy, he says this. He says, do you know how to tell when a person needs words of encouragement? Like, do you know what to look for when a person needs to be encouraged? He says the way that you know someone needs encouragement is if they're breathing. And it's certainly true. People have got a lot on their plate, especially now with everything that's going on. Coronavirus, back and forth with all of that, with all of the unrest and difficulty in our country. This has been a hard year for many. But even without all of that, people need encouragement. Wives, when it comes to your husband, maybe you can't relate, but did you know your husband constantly has things running through his head? Like, do I have the main one being, do I have what it takes? Do I have what it takes to be a good dad? Do I have what it takes to be a good husband? Do I have what it takes to be a good provider? Do I have what it takes to be a good leader? Do I have what it takes? And sometimes your husband simply needs to hear, hey, you know what? You are knocking this husband-dad thing out of the park. And ladies, so often your husband goes out in the world and gets beat up, and what's tough is when he comes home and sometimes there's criticism there. And this works in the opposite way as well. Men, your wife asks this question as well. Am I important? Am I special? Does my husband notice and see all the things that I do and all the things that I bring to our family? Husbands, you need to bring those words of encouragement to your wife. And then there's our kids as well, who often they're learning and trying to figure things out, and they look to us for guidance, and they're going to mess up. They're going to fall short. They're going to break things. They're going to do things wrong. And they need to know that they're loved unconditionally and supported. Same thing with church members. You never know on a Sunday morning what someone in the church is dealing with. And so why not just offer them a word of encouragement? Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. And so your challenge for this week is to keep that in mind, to spread some refreshment and some encouragement around you. But today, specifically, find one person and see if there's a way that you can encourage them and lift them up. And so I pray that you're having a good week. I pray that the rest of your week goes well. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. Be a source of refreshment to the people around you. Have a blessed day, church, and we'll see you soon.